All right, welcome back here. Jordy Culotta Show, as always, brought to you by our friends over at Siraj Realty, Siraj and Rotenberg Realty, as we've got our spot right here on Government Street, 2148 Government Street, for lease right now. If you are in the market and looking for a spot that is very accessible to downtown with great exposure, on Government Street, which is a great thoroughfare all throughout the week of a ton of business traffic moving up and down Government Street. Get in touch with our friends over at Siraj Rotenberg Real Estate to get inside the space. You can come check it out as it is available for you. All right, right now some great tidbits up over at On 3 at the Bengal Tiger. Obviously, so much stuff going on this past weekend with the Bayou Splash. Some of our favorites are over there, including Sam Spiegelman. It has been too long since we've caught up with Spiegs, and it is good to catch up with him this morning. Good morning, Sam. How are you?
Doing great, Jordy. Thanks for having me, man. Absolutely.
Lots to get to, so let's jump right into it. Bayou Splash over the weekend. Tigers pick up a commitment from another offensive lineman. This time they pick up Orie Williams. What did the Tigers get?
Yeah, this is a Brad Davis eval. I think Brad might have been his first offer almost 2 years ago. Orie Williams has length and size for days. What BK did last year, getting guys like Lance Hurd and Emory Jones. Those guys are not in the state this year. So Brad Davis went out of state. San Marcos, Texas, is a guy that Georgia, that Texas, everyone wanted early on. Listen, his play is not. He is not a 4-star. He's not a 5-star, but this is a guy that you were talking about in 3 or 4 or 5 years in a weight program, getting to really get coached up at the offensive line position that can potentially play on Saturdays and then Sundays. Orie Williams has a wingspan. The size, I mean, he's bigger than Lance Hurd from a length perspective, a wingspan perspective. A lot of raw tools that really get to see how he develops at LSU, but down the line, a lot of upside for this kid.
Sammy, you mentioned the evaluation that Brad Davis is going through. Can you take us through what that is like? Because the offensive line has changed their identity faster than any position group at LSU since Brian Kelly has been there.
Yeah, I mean, look at that offensive line. Look at the depth that they have. I was in a conversation about LSU's offensive line over the weekend, and there's an argument about who is the most athletic offensive lineman, and then you kind of look at the depth and look at who they have right now between Will Campbell, Emory Jones. These are youngsters. Lance Hurd, who's being groomed. The guys that they're currently assembling in this class right now. There's an argument about how athletic these guys are, but Will Campbell has been a dominant player since he was a freshman at Neville. The same Emory Jones, a multi-sport state champion, football, powerlifting, basketball, and those are 4- and 5-star guys. When you look at this 2024 cycle. Obviously they got a big time commitment from Ethan Callaway out there in North Carolina, but a guy like Orie Williams is not a guy that has fallen to LSU in the past. He's out of state. He's got size and length for days. This is a real Davis and his staff. Obviously we know that they're locking down Louisiana to that, but the fact that they have ties to North Carolina and South Carolina, ties to Texas and Mississippi. Louisiana is not an offensive line factory. The numbers suggest it. History suggests it. Last year was probably operation with guys like Lance Hurd and before that Will Campbell, Emory Jones. So they have to be able to go into neighboring states like Texas and get really prospects like Williams, that guys that maybe don't come in and change your program, but down the line give you great depth and potentially great play.
Yeah, and even guys like Paul Mubanga and DJ Chester in this class, who I know athletically they love. All right, we're going to get to everybody that was there. Let's real quick, the one that was not there, Wardell Mack. What's going on here?
Yeah, this has been one of the more interesting recruitments. I've considered Wardell to be an LSU lean for a good chunk of his recruitment. And recently, after he visited in the spring for the spring game, I thought that was a sign that LSU was kind of in the driver's seat going into what should be a summer decision. This June, he took all of his out-of-state official visits, Florida State, and Texas. And the confidence on the Texas side was definitely there after his visit. He was supposed to be at the Splash on Friday. He elected not to show up. Instead, he was at the Emmett Ford. He went over Swamp. returned to the Swamp. I think that was his third visit in the last 3 or 4 months. I think at this point, it's safe to say LSU is really content with the blue chippers that they have in their secondary. I'm not closing the door on Wardell and LSU, but it's shaping up to be an a Florida versus Texas race for Wardell Mack. Texas has missed on a couple of their top DB targets. We know that Terry Joseph is a New Orleans guy. I think they're putting their chips in the middle for Wardell Mack, and I think that they've gotten a lot of people in his camp. Their eyes are big for Texas. I don't think Florida is out of it yet, but it's shaping up to be a Longhorns get in the boot for this year.
Who is that, Jabbar Jalouk and Corey Raymond leading that?
For Florida, and Billy Napier is very much involved. Billy Napier obviously sees Wardell. He's a top 30 player in the country and would love to make a splash at his old stomping grounds. And then for Texas, you have a lot of familiar faces. We talked about Terry Joseph and Steve Sarkisian, but Brandon Harris, who everyone at LSU knows very well, is their director of recruiting and a big reason why Texas is so prevalent in Louisiana now.
All right, back to the Bayou Splash on Friday night. Dominic McKinley was there from Acadiana, and I know Frank Wilson spent a lot of time with he and his family. What type of progress was made, if any at all, for LSU?
Yeah, I think. Well, the theme of the summer for Dominic McKinley has been the animate. Depending on who you talk to, you can hear a lot about Texas. Depending on who you talk to, you hear a lot about Oklahoma. And there's a thought that, he's been to A&M quite a bit, and there, Elijah Robinson has a history of getting some of the best defensive linemen in the country year in and year out since he's been at A&M. But LSU has put Frank Wilson on the case. Obviously LSU is playing from behind after Jamar Cain went to the NFL. Jimmy Lindsey recruited Dominic McKinley when he was at South Carolina, but the biggest connection that Dominic had with LSU was Gerald Chapman, who's now the defensive line coach at Tulane. Once that move was made, LSU was kind of playing from behind. Now, they put the Godfather on the case. Frank Wilson has, I don't want to say he leveled the playing field, but LSU is certainly going to be a factor with Dominic McKinley. The question is whether this 5-star defensive lineman wants to make a decision before Acadiana kicks off their season, or if he's going to play it out to the end, which, according to people at the end of this visit, there is still a lot of uncertainty when Dominic McKinley will make his decision. To me, LSU still has an official visit. I know that he's probably going to get back on campus at A&M. He'll probably get back to Oklahoma at some point. Frank Wilson and LSU have a visit. Even if he is leaving out of state if he makes it in August, I think there is still time for LSU. I don't expect them to go anywhere in this recruitment until it's over.
All right, two of the out-of-state guys that were here that made a big move this weekend was Kaden Durham and Colin Simmons. Durham said he was moving his commitment, did not make the trip to College Station on Saturday after spending Friday in Baton Rouge. And then Colin Simmons just looked too good in purple and gold all over social media. Update us, Sammy. What's going on here with the Duncanville Stars?
Yeah, I've moved my pick from Oklahoma to LSU for Kaden Durham. As I put on the board yesterday, I put Oklahoma back in December after Duncanville won a state title. You can talk about kids from Baton Rouge or Lafayette. Kaden Durham is from the state of Oklahoma, so his ties to the Sooner State are very, very deep. His mom ran track there, but you need to credit to LSU. I think very rarely this works. They have zeroed in on one running back in this 2024 cycle. He's an out-of-state kid from a powerhouse in North Texas. And right now, I feel like LSU is the team to beat with Kaden Durham. I think they have completely won him over. Really, from the visit they got in June to this weekend, I think that surge has been astronomical. I'm not ruling out Oklahoma, but you can already read between the lines that they are moving in a different direction. They scooped up the number one running back in the country, Taylor Tatum, earlier this month. And while Kaden Durham would be a great prize for the Sooners and DeMarco Murray, I think this is reading LSU through and through. As for Colin Simmons, listen, I put a pick in for Colin Simmons to LSU last summer when I was told that they were the team to beat and they are going to be in the recruitment until the end. Fast forward a year, I think this is down to two teams. A&M had a lot of rub this spring, but this is coming down to Texas and LSU. After he officially visited Texas, there was a lot of confidence in Austin, and I can tell you there is a lot of confidence in Baton Rouge now that Colin is back in Duncanville. Still, this is still a two-team race. I don't think that Colin is going to make a decision anytime very soon. I think he's going to tease it. I think he's going to have fun with the game. But at the end of the day, it comes down to a few things. Development, he wants to be in these big-time, primetime games on the biggest stage in college football. He wants his parents to be in, his mom to be in the stand, his little brother to be in the stands, and he wants to know that if he goes somewhere, they're going to take a 5-star plus edge, the number one edge in the country, and turn him into a first-round pick. We're not talking about a first-round pick. We're talking about a number one overall pick, a guy who's in the discussion to be the number one overall pick. So this is going to come down to LSU or Texas. Whether a decision is made in August or in December, I still think it's going to come down to those two teams. I think it's a toss-up still.
How big is NIL in this?
I think NIL is a factor, but I do not think it is the overall factor. I think we've seen some other blue blood programs around the country fall out of the race. Tennessee's, Alabama's, Georgia's, Oregon's have all gotten visits from Colin Simmons. It's coming down to, proximity to home and development, and who can check both of those boxes and really kind of run away with this. Because if you know Colin Simmons, when it's down to business, I think he's going to be ready to make a decision. But there are a lot of people that are staying alive in this race. I think he needs to kind of distance himself and figure out when he wants to make a decision. Another thing for LSU is they still have that official visit, and I know that he's been he's going to get to some places during the season for games.
How close are Durham and Simmons? Are they tight? Are they really good friends?
I mean, the Duncanville football program, it's a brotherhood. It's exactly what you would think it is. That's why they are so close on and off the field. I don't think that Kaden Durham's decision will impact where Colin Simmons' decision is. Same way that Kadavian Dotson Walker's decision didn't impact Colin Simmons. Colin Simmons is going to make this decision with his mom and his family. And I would be absolutely surprised if it wasn't LSU or Texas.
What was your biggest takeaway from this weekend? This was such a built-up weekend for LSU with the Bayou Splash, and it seems like they hit on everybody getting them to campus besides Mack. What was your biggest takeaway from the time spent with the top recruits?
Well, on the Kaden Durham point, I think it's very rare, especially in the state of Louisiana where there's not a ton of blue chip running backs this year. I think the fact that LSU is at least put itself in a position to close with Kaden Durham, like we talk about, a speedster with insane times. I think he's just scratching the surface. He's very new to football, only been playing for 2 or 3 years. I think Frank Wilson putting LSU in a position to get Kaden Durham from a powerhouse like Duncanville speaks volumes about LSU. We're talking about, and I'm going to get to this point in a second, but we're talking about LSU as a national program there. For them to potentially be able to do that, I think that speaks volumes. And then from the other side, with Wardell Mack excluding from the conversation, and we don't know how that recruitment is going to play out, the way that they've set up to kind of close the deal with the in-state recruits, there are some cycles where Louisiana is very deep, and there are some where it's very top heavy. This year, LSU is kind of they're not going to allow anyone to squeak through the cracks here. They are putting themselves to get the best offensive linemen, the best receivers, the best DBs. Anyone who wants to be in the state is going to have a chance to play for LSU. Very few exceptions are going to squeak through the cracks. There are a few that you're going to have to watch, but when you have a Louisiana-heavy class, a lot of players that want to play for LSU, that have kind of dreamt of playing for LSU, you're kind of negating some of these external factors like the transfer portal and NIL and whatnot, and you get a good group of players that I think that it's part of the formula for a championship down the road when you get players that want to be at a program like this.
Is LSU getting the feel that Xavier Atkins is going to flip?
Yeah, I think that's been a long time coming. I think when you get a player like Tylen Singleton, who can do so many different things, I think he was the catalyst for Xavier Atkins with A&M so much in the mix with both Tylen and Xavier. Also Arkansas playing those cards right. They were trying to, negative recruit LSU to get one of these hybrid second-level defenders. With Xavier now in the Houston area and LSU getting Tylen right before the Bayou Splash, Xavier going back to A&M, I think that says it all. He had the chance. He was on the RSVP list to come to LSU, to go back home to Baton Rouge. He elected to go to College Station. He has been a top priority for DJ Durkin. I think it's just a matter of time before he plays for the Aggies.
And the name that keeps popping around linebacker is Devin Smith, right? The Georgia native?
Yeah, that's a name that that LSU got on campus. Listen, if Xavier Atkins wants to flip to another SEC school, LSU and Matt House is doing a fantastic job of finding these second-level defenders Tylen Singleton is one of my favorite players, bar none in the country. But Devon Keys, and then you add someone like Devin Smith. Xavier Atkins is a really great player. He's an SEC linebacker through and through. But if you look at that potential second-level defenders of Tylen Singleton, Devon Keys, and Devin Smith, that's nothing that you're going to lose sleep about.
So, class of 25 had some superstars here this weekend, including Harlem Berry, who I want to ask you about, and some other running backs. But Bryce Underwood was maybe the biggest surprise of the weekend, right, Sam? This is the number one quarterback in the country, the number one player in the country of 2025, spent time with LSU. What was the takeaway there?
Jordy, this kid has a book about him already. I mean, if LSU fans want to know about Bryce Underwood, I implore you to read. I think it's called Quarterback Dads. This kid he's a real deal. Number one overall player in the 2025 class, and he was back in Baton Rouge. He showed up at Michigan on Sunday. He's from Bellevue, Michigan, about 30 minutes outside of Ann Arbor. And you can already guess the same way with the kid from Baton Rouge that Michigan is going to beat it till the end with Bryce Underwood. But Joe Sloan, LSU's quarterback coach, we know he had his biggest first task was flipping Ricky Collins, but look at what Joe Sloan has done since. He went out to Florida and got a state championship winning quarterback Colin Hurley, a guy that Ohio State, Georgia, Miami, and Florida all wanted and coveted desperately. The guy that camped and blew them away in person has become kind of the face of their 2024 recruiting class. And now Sloan, there's not a 2025 quarterback that he really fell in love with except for the number one quarterback in the country. And it looks like they are, I don't want to say they're all in, but their chips are very much in the middle with Bryce Underwood. Joe Sloan and the family, the Underwood family, have really vibed, as the kids say. I think that you need to look at Joe Sloan as one of the best young national recruiters. I mean, we're talking about what he's doing with Bryce Underwood, but he has been involved in so many of these in-state recruitments. He has kind of taken over the capital of Baton Rouge area, North Louisiana, his old stomping grounds, and then going to places like Virginia and Florida, and in Bryce Underwood's case, Michigan. I think that LSU is on Bryce Underwood's short list. We know that Ohio State is out of the mix after they found their 25 quarterback. This is going to be another national battle. We're talking about Colin Simmons and Kaden Durham in the 2024 class, and now at the most important position at quarterback, we're talking about LSU going toe-to-toe with Michigan for Bryce Underwood, the number one player, number one quarterback in the country for next year. And right now, if not, the other options are George McIntyre. Like, Joe Sloan is changing quarterback recruiting for the Tigers.
Wow. Harlem Berry was in town along with James Simon. This is a special year for Louisiana and running backs. Talking about 2025, I'd imagine that Frank Wilson has zeroed in on both of these guys.
Yeah, I think LSU is in a really great position with both of these guys. We talked about them having to go out of state for Kaden Durham. Well, they have to keep him in state for 2025. At Harlem Berry, I think he'd be pretty open at this point that he's a pretty big LSU lean. One of the earliest offers, I think one of Frank's first offers when he even got to LSU at camp last summer. Harlem Berry, his uncle is Jabbar Jalouk, and he's been to Florida this summer. He's made it to Texas, and Texas, like we talked about with Wardell Mack and Arch Manning and Derek Williams in the past, got a strong Louisiana group over there on that Longhorn staff, and they've gotten Harlem on campus. But this is a kid that grew up watching Leonard Fournette, another New Orleans kid, and I have a hard time seeing that LSU won't get Harlem Berry in their 2025 class earlier rather than later. The interesting one will be James Simon. We know who James Simon's dad is. We know that the Baton Rouge ties are there, and after he visited LSU, he went out to A&M. He's been to A&M a few times. He's been to TCU a few times. We know that Georgia and Alabama are also getting in the mix with James Simon. We talk about Harlem Berry's electricity and speed. Well, you can contrast that with James Simon, SEC build and toughness between the tackles. I think both of these guys are going to have their pick of the options, but I like the early foundation that LSU has built with both of these in-state backs. If you're able to get someone like Kaden Durham as your sole featured back in 2024 and then compound that with guys like Harlem Berry and James Simon in 2025, that running back room next fall or the next couple of falls is going to be very, very elite.
This class of 2025 has some star power in it as well, as you mentioned. Who were some of the other underclassmen that were in Baton Rouge?
You had Brett Underwood. You had all those receivers from Texas. You had Decorian Moore, who's from Duncanville, in my opinion. Is the closest thing to Odell Beckham that I've seen since Odell was at Newman.
Oh, wow.
And then you're talking about going out of state, but they had Taz Williams, who's a 2025 four-star receiver from Red Oak in Dallas. You had Andrew Marsh, who's a top 30 wide receiver in the country out of the Houston area. And these are all of Coach Hankton's top receiver targets in the state of Texas that they had on campus this past weekend.
Is now a legacy player out of Sulphur, J.D. LaFleur, has made a pretty big jump here. His dad, David LaFleur, was an All-American in the 90s. Does LSU sitting in a really good spot here, right?
Yeah, well, look, you kind of see some familiarity with, I think it was that 2022 class when Will Campbell and Walker Howard and Bo Bordelon were committed. Well, now you have Brett Bordelon committed in this 2025 class. He's the face. Right. And then maybe J.D. LaFleur joining him, probably not too far out. We know that J.D., he worked out at LSU a few times over the summer, and, man, he blew it out of the water. Tavion Galloway was one of LSU's tight end commits in the 2024 class. He ended up decommitting. And in watching the 2024 tight end commit working out alongside J.D. LaFleur, you were kind of curious who was committed to LSU and who was the highly rated tight end. But J.D. LaFleur, man, he is a son of an NFL tight end. I mean, he should not be so short-handed, so precise with his route running and catching in the middle of going into his junior season at Sulphur. I can tell you in that part of the state, they've been raving about him throughout the spring. So to see him collect that offer and now be at the top of LSU's wish list in that 2025 class is certainly a good sign. I would not be surprised if that 2025 class begins to get rolling a little bit faster this season, and they have a good chunk of that group already when spring rolls around and they start really adding pieces next spring.
At Sam Speegs on Twitter, a great follow, especially this time of the year. Sammy, last one, I'll get you out of here. They had a huge decommitment from Ole Miss over the weekend that seems like has LSU's fingerprints all over it. Joseph Pryor, offensive lineman out of Manny. What's going on here?
Yeah, I think today is going to be a really fun day for LSU fans, Jordy. I'll say that. Joseph Pryor committed to Ole Miss in June. He early on, a lot of the Big Ten teams liked him. Nebraska, Indiana,
Iowa.
His stock started to rise. They won a state championship. Him, Tackett Curtis, Tylen Singleton are all teammates on Manny. Spent this offseason, he's lost some weight. But this is how I would describe Joe Pryor. Not only is he a great football player, a tough, hard-nosed road grader, classic, old-school offensive lineman, this is the kind of kid that you want in your locker room. He is a tempo setter, a culture setter, a kid that leaves it all out on the field. He's the son of an offensive line coach at Nat Central. I could tell you Jess Curtis, the head coach there, the former coach at Manny, believes that this guy represents everything he wants in his football players. He got that offer from LSU. He visited on Friday with his buddy Tylen Singleton, made it to Ole Miss, and decommitted a few hours later. I think as we're talking about LSU building out an offensive line group that's not only talented but has depth. Joseph Pryor, according to Brian Kelly, is the center of the future for the Tigers. I think he's a guy that not only adds depth but adds a little bit of attitude to that offensive line group. Again, if you're going to win a national championship, you want someone like Joseph Pryor setting the tempo in your locker room.
And they still are waiting on potentially one more in Blake Ivy?
He visited this week. He visited A&M, and we expecting a decision before the end of the summer, but couple of loops. I like A&M, but this is definitely closer than people realized.
Sam Spiegelman, one of the best, man. We are blessed here in this market to have great people who cover recruiting. Sam is one of them. Make sure and follow him on Twitter at Sam Speaks to keep up with everything. As he said, it could be an exciting day for LSU, so make sure you're dialed into recruiting. Thank you, man. Good to see you.
Yep, good to see you too, Jordy. You're the best.
All right, man. There he is, Sam Spiegelman, checking in this morning on this Monday. We appreciate him. Make sure and read all of his stuff at On3, all over social media, on3.com. You can keep up with Sam Spiegelman and the rest of the squad over there. As LSU had a very successful weekend. Look, man, I'm not panicking on the Wardell Mack thing just yet. I'm really not yet. I hear that Texas and Florida have done their best here. I remember Jamar Chase's recruitment where everybody was talking about everybody but LSU. Mm-hmm. And when it was time for LSU to make their move, when it was time to go all in, They loaded up the Sprinter van and put every single member of the traveling recruiting staff. If you could go, you were on the bus. Dave Aranda was there. Corey Raymond was there. Everybody was there. They knocked on the door, sat down, had dinner at the Chase's house, and let them know where they stood. This is how important you are to LSU football. And I think when the day comes, Uncle Frank will make the trip down to New Orleans, where he hadn't paid for a meal since the early 80s, and gets the deal done. Wardell Mack's too good of a player. He's too high on the board. He means too much to this class. And for LSU to set the reputation back to DBU, you got to get guys like him. I mean, you pull Tyrann Mathieu out and start recruiting Wardell Mack if you have to. I mean, that's the type of player he is. I'm not panicking yet on Mack. I think there's a lot of time left here. And look, Texas and Florida have done tremendous jobs, but it's not over for LSU.
It's almost like you have to make a statement if you're LSU. Like, you don't come into John Arrett, you don't go into Marrero and go get somebody. If you have Frank Wilson on the case, it's almost a point of pride. Like, yeah, oh, now you want him? Oh, now I'm going to get him for sure. And I know he's a 4-star, he's a good player, but it's all like, don't poke the bear and make Frank really make him want to come to LSU, because he can do that. Like, if you want to give Frank's full attention to somebody, look what he did with Harlem Berry. Look what he did with Kaden Durham. Whenever he has your full attention, he usually gets you. And if it's Wardell Mack, a corner from John Arrett,
I agree. Not yet. Not panicking yet.
Not panicking. Not even close.
Looking forward to our new partnership with one of the best Ochsner Andrews Sports Medicine, brought to you daily by the Ochsner Andrews Sports Medicine Institute, treating more than 30,000 athletes a year with innovative treatments for sports injuries. You can visit ochsner.org/reports to learn more. Ochsner Andrews Sports Medicine Institute gets the same sports medicine care that the pros receive, with minimal invasive treatments and quicker recovery times. Visit ochsner.org/sports to learn more or to schedule your appointment today. That is ochsner.org/sportsmed /sportsmed to learn more today. Ochsner Andrews Sports Medicine Institute. Don't let a sports injury keep you sidelined. The team over at Ochsner's Healthcare for athletes with same-day appointments, and they're available near you. Visit ochsner.org/sportsmed to learn more. We'll be back. Hour 2 next here. Jordy Culotta Show, as always, built by R&B Builders.